Meet my new friend Floyd. Born and raised in the United States, Floyd is a content creator who shares engaging videos about his life in the Philippines. From condo hunting to food recommendations, Floyd creates highly engaging videos that showcase the Philippines from an American perspective. Be sure to check out his content, link below. In our conversation, Floyd and I discussed the cultural differences between the US and the Philippines, how he met his Filipina girlfriend, the advantages of living in the Philippines, and so much more. I hope you guys enjoy the video. You live in the Philippines now, is that right?
Yes, so I recently moved to the Philippines. Like 3 months ago. However, prior to that, I spent some time, I guess you could say, kind of living somewhat of a nomadic lifestyle, coming out here, for a couple of months at a time. And over the course of a year, I just fell in love with the place so much that I decided, why not just make the full transition and move out here?
And that seems to be a pretty common trend among foreigners who visit the Philippines, especially for the first time, where they're like, hey, I'm going to spend a couple weeks out in the Philippines, see what it's like. And then, next thing you know, they're there for like 2 or 3 years. So what was the motivation for you to go there the very first time, like on your very first trip?
This was like around COVID, maybe post COVID time, and I wanted to do something to treat myself. So I made a commitment that I would take myself on a trip. I was just dead set on that. And I picked a couple of different places. The first place was Puerto Rico. Now, that was as far as I was willing to go at that time while still being close to the United States. I'm a very practical person, but sometimes I think, well, I don't want to go too far because what if something goes wrong? What if something happens? So that was the first spot. However, Puerto Rico ended up having the worst hurricane that year and an earthquake shortly after a hurricane, so Puerto Rico was out.
Are you interested in learning Tagalog but having trouble finding quality learning materials? Allow me to introduce my Beginner's Tagalog course. 8 years ago, I began teaching myself Tagalog, but I got really frustrated, not only by the complexities of the language, but also the lack of resources for Tagalog. So that's why I decided to create the language course that I wish I had when I started learning. Sign up for my beginner's bundle and get lifetime access to 18 video lessons with corresponding PDF vocabulary sheets. Click the first link down below to get started. Now, back to the video.
One of my friends recommended I go to South Africa. I didn't know anything about South Africa, and so the only other option at that time was the Philippines. And I kind of toyed around with that idea. I knew a little bit about the Philippines, not too much. One of my closest friends, he's biracial, he's half black, half Filipino. So I knew a little bit about the food, a little bit about the culture. I knew it was an English-speaking country, so I said, hey, why not? Let's roll the dice. And being a single guy, fresh out of a relationship, most single men are going to want to know, what are the women like? So I downloaded a couple of dating apps, started chatting with some Filipinas, and my now girlfriend was on that app, and we really clicked, and we hit things off. And on my first trip, we spent all of our time together, and that's kind of how that first initial trip happened. So, obviously, who could have predicted I would get a relationship, find a new love for a new country? Like, I didn't predict any of those things happening. I just wanted to reward myself for the hard work that I put in my business that year.
When was that first trip?
So that was last year in April.
Wow, so you've been back and forth a little bit, even within the last year and a bit.
That's correct. So I was out here on my first trip in April, then I came back in September, like around the fall time. And then my third and final trip was this year, 2024, in May. And the third trip was really special to me because I was looking for condos. I was, I already had a network built up. I already had friends. I already had a social circle. So the third trip really felt like I was just coming home. I was like, all right, I'm here. Let's go find a condo. Let's go find an apartment.
You knew what to expect and everything.
Exactly. People ask me all the time about my thoughts on the Philippines, the weather, how do you get used to it? We have the same weather. Like the Philippines and Texas, surprisingly, like the weather's similar. There's typhoons over here in the Philippines. In Texas, we have hurricanes. So weather-wise, it wasn't too big of an adjustment.
Is there a Filipino population in the southern states of the U.S.?
In Texas, there is a little bit of a Filipino population. For most Asian cultures, it's usually going to be on the East Coast or the West Coast. I think it's because it's easier to get to those parts of America from, whatever part of Asia, but also the Philippines. So my closest friend, he lives in Texas, but he grew up in the Bay Area of Oakland. And so for him, he talks about, man, Floyd, there were so many Filipinos, there's so many Filipino restaurants out there. And even on the East Coast, so my brother lives in Philly, and when I went to go visit him before moving out here, we actually found that there was a pretty decent size, Filipino population out there on the East Coast. But for Texas, it's kind of far and few in between. There's a couple of different spots that I've gone to, specifically in Houston, Texas, where there's, good Filipino community.
I've heard that California has one of the biggest populations of Filipinos in the U.S. and New York as well. Probably has something to do with the concentration of people as well, right? Like that would be where the largest populations are too. Where are you in the Philippines?
So I am in Makati, and I've been to a couple of different parts of the Philippines already. So I've been to Tarlac City. I have gone to Quezon City. I've been to Palawan, Tacloban. I mean, those were for all different reasons, not to just scout out places to live. Sometimes it was visiting friends. Sometimes it was visiting my girlfriend's family members. But for me, Makati just felt like home. I know for a lot of Westerners, BGC has been portrayed as like the number one spot for, Westerners if you're new to the Philippines. However, I've spent time in BGC and it just really didn't align with how I wanted my lifestyle to be out here in the Philippines. It almost felt too much like America for most of the times that I've been to BGC. I ended up making Makati my home base, and it's been fantastic.
I agree with you with BGC. And to a certain degree, sometimes Makati can fall into the same category where it's like very westernized. Yeah, it caters to a certain demographic of people, and not everyone that lives there is like that, but there are people that tend more towards just looking for a place that's cheaper to live, not necessarily a place that has authentic Filipino culture. Where like when you get out into the provinces or even some of the different like barangay in Manila itself, you can tell that like it's a completely different culture. Like it just feels way different. When I was in the Philippines, I spent a large portion of my time in Makati, actually. That's where we stayed. So we probably crossed paths at some point, honestly.
We did.
We got out to some of the other provinces and different areas as well, but I spent the majority of my time there. So for my next trip, I really want to like branch out and see something else. So for you, during your 3 months in the Philippines, has Makati been your favorite spot to be?
Yes, it for me, it just has the best of both worlds. Like it has a lot of Western convenience. However, there are a lot of different parts of Makati that feel like the authentic Philippines. So it's got a good mix. It's got a really good mix.
Was it difficult for you when you first went to the Philippines, like culturally speaking? Like I know that we're talking about Makati being a little bit more westernized than other areas of the Philippines, but it's still a very different culture than what we're used to in the West. Was there any culture shock when you first arrived?
I would say not as much. My closest friend who's in the States right now, his name is Dre. He's the one who introduced me to Filipino food. And this was like years before I, even decided to go to the Philippines. This was before I even had a passport. I didn't even know where the Philippines was on a map. And he introduced me to the cuisine and the food. So that's kind of how I first fell in love with the Philippines, is through chicken adobo, pancit, lumpia, caldereta, and all of the delicious food. So food-wise, not so much of a culture shock. I think for me, the biggest culture shock was just the exchange rate, just seeing how far my dollar was able to go out here. That was a big surprise to me. And I also think in some other ways, I was surprised by how westernized some parts of the Philippines are and how friendly the people were. It's that common stereotype that Filipinos are like, super friendly, they're super caring, they're, really genuine. But just being able to experience that for myself, walking down the street, saying hello, seeing smiles, like just seeing people who are just happy. That was a culture shock for me.
Yeah, that definitely is something that I hear from a lot of foreigners who spend time in the Philippines. Like, hey, everyone's so welcoming, they're so kind. Something that I've heard from people is that there might be an element of preferential treatment for people who aren't from the Philippines. Meaning for like people like you and I, we go there, we're not Filipino. People treat us maybe even better than they would like their fellow Filipinos. Do you think that exists in the Philippines, or what has your experience been like?
I never even had to think about that until now, but I think there could be some degree of truth to that statement. I think being a foreigner and being different, that that could hold true. But I also just I think Filipinos just have like the top level when it comes to hospitality. I think it's just baked into the culture. So there could be some truth to your statement, but I also think because of the culture, because they're so welcoming, because, they're so accommodating and, hospitable, I think it's just part of the culture. I think it's just something that's natural.
You mentioned that before you went to the Philippines, you already had some experience with Filipino food, and you mentioned some of those dishes. Do you have a favorite?
My all-time favorite as of right now, sinigang. Specifically, my girlfriend's sinigang. So shout out to my girlfriend. She makes the best sinigang. And honestly, at first, it was chicken adobo. Then it became pork adobo. Then it became beef caldereta. But when I first tried sinigang, oh my gosh.
That's a staple. That's a Filipino staple. Yeah, it's like a classic food that like people prepare at home too. It's not a flashy dish. It's like a staple food for people, I think. What kind of meat does she put in the sinigang?
So pork. She does pork. I don't think I've actually, yeah. I've never had chicken sinigang or shrimp sinigang or fish. Yeah, none of that. But it's only been pork sinigang. One time she wanted to change it up. And she's like, oh, I think I'll add some shrimp. I said, no. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Don't mess with the recipe. It's good just the way it is. I kind of have a weird experience with sinigang because I ate it a lot here in Canada with Filipino people, especially with my ex-girlfriend. She made it all the time. But from what I can remember, 90% of the time, it was chicken. Just chicken. And so I assumed that sinigang is chicken. That's just what it is. And then I would talk to Filipinos and be like, oh yeah, your classic chicken sinigang. And they're like, what do you mean chicken sinigang? But no, I've never had that before in my life, and I'm Filipino. And then that was the first time I realized, like, oh, I guess that was not the way it's normally prepared. That's not your traditional recipe. So I was kind of shocked when I found out that it was supposed to be pork or shrimp as well. And there's also a salmon one, I think.
So did you eventually try pork sinigang?
No, I don't think I actually have. That's a good question. I don't think I've never tried it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. You got to cross it off the bucket list.
Yeah, I guess I do. Yeah, the whole time I was in the Philippines, I never had any sinigang. I'm not like a huge soup guy. I don't love soups, even like from any different country. And so I tend to lean more into like sisig. I love sisig. That's probably my favorite. Yeah, more like rice dishes and less soup is probably where I would lean towards. But yeah, next time I go, I'll try the pork sinigang. What would you say like the main differences between American culture and Filipino culture are?
One big difference, I would say, in the Philippines, I've noticed they're a lot more conservative and family oriented. Not to say that America doesn't have those same set of values. It's just America used to feel that way, or America used to have those values, and things have changed, cultures have changed, times have changed. So I've noticed that in the Philippines, there's more of conservative type of approach to things. And then family is important, which I really love. And that's one of the things that made me feel comfortable about living here. It made me feel extremely grateful for my girlfriend. Just knowing that, hey, this is someone that I could, have a life with, I could get married to. And it's someone who has very similar values to what I already have coming from the States.
You've decided to live in the Philippines. Does that mean that you're going to be staying there for the foreseeable future?
That is correct. And, a lot of people ask me, do I miss the States? Is there anything I miss about America? I would say outside of my family and friends, there's really nothing I miss about the States, to be honest with you. Nothing I can think of. Even when it comes to some modern conveniences, I mean, Philippines has a lot of modern conveniences. When it comes to restaurants, there's a lot of Western restaurants out here. When it comes to travel, in fact, I think there's a lot of things that I've gained that I didn't have access to in the States that I wouldn't trade for the world right now. Like access to almost all of Asia from the Philippines, and it's relatively way more affordable than me coming from the United States to try to get to, these Asian countries. That's one major thing because even right now, me and my girlfriend have been planning a trip to Bali. We're planning a trip to Thailand and Vietnam and Laos. And just adding up how much that would have cost me if I was coming from the States. Like, for example, my first plane ticket to the Philippines was around $1,600 USD. So far, I've been able to get it down to like 1,000. I think the cheapest plane ticket so far I've paid was like $965 to come from Texas to the Philippines, which is great. However, when I'm scanning these websites and I'm seeing I could go from the Philippines, from Manila to Thailand for $200, $300 tops, like that's mind blowing.
Yeah, totally. And you could do like multiple countries in 1 year as well.
Yes.
And then I guess from a lot of those places too, especially if you're staying within Southeast Asia, when you get there, your American dollar is also going much farther, right? Like even probably more than it would go in some of the common vacation spots for Americans, like, Dominican Republic or Mexico or Puerto Rico or all those places. Thailand, Philippines, Cambodia are probably much cheaper in comparison. What other benefits have you noticed from living in the Philippines?
Overall, for myself, my cost of living has gone down. So my condo that I'm in right now, I'm paying around 38,000 pesos a month, which right now that's around like $650-ish. It's a significant drop in what I was paying for rent in the States. My apartment in the States was $1,500 a month. And right now, my overall total expenses monthly between myself and my girlfriend, it's around $1,600 altogether. So just knowing that the cost I was paying in rent alone is my overall monthly cost for everything out here in the Philippines, that was, a very positive trade-off to make.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. It's like 3 times the rent price, essentially. That works in our favor coming with American and Canadian dollars, but it does have an assumption that you need to continue to be earning your income in American or Canadian dollars for that to work in your favor, right? Does that mean you're working nomadically while you're in the Philippines?
Working nomadically, and I actually work overnight. As a content creator, sometimes the comments get to me because people make these crazy assumptions because they only see one side of your life. And a lot of times the assumption that's made about my content is, oh, you're so lucky you get to do this. Oh, you're so lucky you were able to retire in the Philippines and live off your pension. I'm like, I'm 30. I don't have a pension and I work overnight and I'm getting, a minimal sleep as it is because in the daytime, that's when I usually film my content. So it's kind of interesting that I'm living this life, which is a great life. I'm very grateful for it. But there's always going to be some type of trade-off. There's always going to be some type of sacrifice that's needed to make your goals and make your dreams happen. And sometimes people don't see that and they only see, me in Palawan or or me going out to, this place or that place.
Yeah, I like your content a lot. Like I've seen a lot of your stuff on Instagram and some stuff on YouTube as well. It's like really, really good, really high quality, very informative. So yeah, it would be awesome if you could do that full time. I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate that.
You didn't ask this question yet, but if anyone's wondering what's next for me, what's my next plan of action now that I'm actually living here, I plan on traveling throughout every part of the Philippines. So my content will gradually change because although I love the content that I've done so far, and I haven't been a content creator for that long when it comes to this, I've been doing social media and content creation for over 8 years through various different other channels. But when it comes to me being in the Philippines, this all started last year, September, on my second trip. I only started it because my mom kept asking me to share photos and videos of my trip, and I'm a very private person. I didn't share a single photo or a video on my first trip, but sometimes mothers have a way of just getting to you. So I decided and I made the commitment and I said, hey, I'll share this content. I'll share my experiences. My family's interested. My friends are interested. But if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it big. I'm going to do it in a way that I've never done it before. And I got really focused on that. And I just started putting up as many videos as I possibly could, sharing my experiences, no matter if it was, hey, I'm in Palawan, or hey, I went to this restaurant in the Philippines, whatever it was. And so many people were interested in it. I didn't expect so many people to be interested in it. But now that that has grown to where it's at now, I'm shifting my focus into showcasing more of the Philippines, and not just showcasing me in Makati or BGC or Quezon City, but I want to go to places like Davao. I want to go to Baguio. I want to go to these, other places in the Philippines and really showcase everything I possibly could about the Philippines.
There's so much to show from the Philippines. Like, even just from the short time that I spent there, you could tell. You just go down one street and suddenly it's a new culture that opens up, and you have new food and new people to talk to. And the country is so rich and concentrated with narratives, I think, with cultures and people and stories and languages and food and everything. And it makes it so exciting as someone that's not from there. You get to come in and explore this new world and tell really profound stories in the process.
I mean, there's that phrase, it's more fun in the Philippines. And I definitely believe it.